Good evening, everyone. Before we get started, I'm going to provide a quick review of the technology. We have set up this meeting as a webinar, which allows us to host meetings with a larger audience. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the link will be available after today's session. We welcome you to revisit this content and share it with your network. We also invite your questions. Please look at the Q&A box on your screen. If you think of a question, you can type it in there. We are planning to create an FAQ at the end of the series that will address some of these questions. If you are having any issues with the Zoom technology, please feel free to either chat me or reach out via email, which I'm dropping in the chat now. Thank you.
Africatown and the future. Welcome, everyone. Good evening to the Africatown and the future of Mobile, Alabama. My name is Levy D. King III, and I humbly serve as the chairman of the board of directors for the Africatown Heritage Preservation Foundation. A word about the purpose and design of the series and tonight's presentation. Primarily, its purpose is to educate all viewers as we travel through our sessions. The method of the series is to lead all participants to ask themselves specific questions rather than telling them what they and how they should think. Secondly, its purpose is to engage Africatown residents and interested persons and organizations in seeking answers that make sense to you guys. Finally, the series seeks to encourage the residents of Africatown and Mobile to speak across historic lines of separation, fear, and misinformation about its future, one that works for all interested parties. Now I have the pleasure. I'm going to turn it over to one of our board of director members for the foundation, Mr. Curtis Flakes, who will introduce tonight's presentation. Please enjoy.
Good evening. My name is Curtis Flakes. Previously, I served 17 years as chief of the Planning and Environmental Division with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Mobile District. This gave me an appreciation for the role of planning in solving community problems, but more importantly, the value and benefits of stakeholders' input, which is so critical in project and community success. Thus, tonight's educational presentation will focus on planning and zoning. It is the third of a 7-part series of educational presentations. The Africatown Heritage Preservation Foundation, or AHPF, commissioned a series of educational presentations. The AHPF was formed and founded by past and present residents of Africatown and is based in Mobile. The foundation mission is to preserve and document the stories of historical Africatown and create cultural and economical transformation through education and partnerships that benefit the environment and mankind. The purpose of this series is to introduce residents and interested persons to information, perspectives, and options relevant to developing both a shared vision for the future of Mobile and neighborhoods like Africatown, as well as mission and uplift current and future residents of Mobile and neighborhoods like Africatown. It's about building capacity to support the community to make informed decisions about its future. This slide outlines the schedule for the rest of the program. Next week, we will be presenting more specific to land and property ownership and the influence of ownership in Africa Town. The following week, we will dive into the topics of demographics, looking at the patterns and trends of the population characteristics of Africa Town. We sincerely hope that you will tune in and invite your friends and others to join us in every week throughout the end of June.
What is planned for Africa Town? Who is leading these planning efforts? And how will the planning outcomes impact the residents of Africa Town? Tonight, we'll be exploring the concepts of planning and zoning and diving into what is planned for Africa Town. As towns and cities change and grow, local governments across the US regularly create short and long-term plans for their cities to shape how those cities will be developed and what the priorities for projects will be for coming years. These planning documents envision a future for a city, town, or neighborhood, and often focus on areas such as housing, economy, transportation, tourism, infrastructure, and more. City plans offer opportunities to build new and improved neighborhoods. How much say do residents have in their plans for their cities, for how their communities will grow? This slide shows the general process for municipal planning. At a high level, the planning process can be explained in 4 parts. The first is analyzing, which asks, where is our community now? How did we get here? The second is envisioning, which requires in-depth and broad discussion of where we want to be in 5, 10, 20, even 50 years. Also, what are our values and principles? The third is planning. How do we get there? What are the steps to achieve the vision? And the fourth is evaluating. What progress have we made towards reaching our goals? In planning processes, ideally, public participation and engagement occurs throughout each of these steps with consistent follow-up so that residents and key stakeholders are informed about how these plans will be implemented. During the development of city plans, city officials may seek community input by hosting community meetings, workshops, and public hearings across the city to understand what concerns and desires residents, business owners, educators, and other community members have for their city. Different cities, of course, have different standards and tactics for gathering public input, some more inclusive and thorough than others. Did you participate in any public engagement activities for the City of Mobile's process for drafting its development plan map for Mobile? If you did you see your ideas incorporated in the final plan and implementation? If you did not, were you aware of the opportunities to provide your input on this plan? How do you see yourself being involved in planning processes in the future? The City of Mobile has various plans for the future of the city, ranging from short-term to long-term visions and actions. The city's comprehensive plan, which is called the Map for Mobile, is the overall long-term citywide plan. It includes the city's vision, its goals, principles, and high-level policies. Think of the Map for Mobile as the long-term roadmap for the city's physical development. The future land use plan and major street plan guides future decisions about zoning, land development, and street infrastructure. The resilience assessment and plan analyzes the city's preparedness to meet future challenges and provide strategies for how to address potential stressors and shocks that could affect Mobile. The map for Mobile then also includes long-range plans for specific neighborhoods, and it includes citywide master plans, which concentrate on specific city services, such as parks and recreation, housing, and mobility. There is a neighborhood plan for Africatown, which was drafted in 2016. To move these plans from goals and ideas to action, the city prioritizes the projects and programs that will accomplish the goals for Map for Mobile. These projects are outlined in the Map for Mobile Action Plan, which walks through actions to do in the near term to implement all of the plans. Moving from visioning and planning into actually doing work on the ground and funding projects is often a city's largest hurdle. The city's capital improvement plan is a 5-year plan for funding and implementing large infrastructure projects such as new roads and facilities. The city also has a plan that summarizes codes and ordinances, which are the regulations that determine how land can be used. And lastly, the city's departments have annual programs and budgets that align with and support the long-range and strategic plans. Throughout tonight's workshop, we will study some of these plans and resources. The Map for Mobile is a comprehensive, long-term plan with recommendations to support Mobile's growth and development over many years and even decades. In June 2021, the city released a 5-year status update that provided a report on how the Map for Mobile's priorities have progressed. The report includes a list of projects, programs, initiatives, and steps that the city has taken. In a previous presentation of this series, we discussed the importance of planning principles in community development. At a high level, this slide shows the Map for Mobile's principles. The first is strong neighborhoods with unique identities, a mix of housing options, and public spaces within walkable distance. Second is functional roadway corridors with attractive, welcoming public spaces, safe accommodations, and thriving businesses. The third is strategic infill and redevelopment, which means the development of vacant properties and blighted areas. The fourth is a connected community with easy and safe ways to move about and access businesses, parks, and open spaces. The fifth is high quality design of the built environment with attractive streets, maintenance of existing property, and new property development. The sixth is a strong downtown with more activities, pedestrian-friendly streets, entertainment, and tourist accommodations. The final is greater opportunities to enjoy natural and recreational assets with quality parks and open spaces and development of key waterfront and riverfront locations. As you read through the Map for Mobile plans in more depth, consider whether these principles align with the ones that you wish for Africatown. Do these principles align with the planning principles that you've identified during our previous workshops? And do you see evidence of these principles in the projects the city has planned or began implementing in Africatown? In the chat, please give some thought and answer, how do you see yourself and the community of Africatown reflected in these principles? Please take a minute and share your thoughts on this last question in the chat. We'll pause here. Please continue to enter ideas in the chat as you think about them. We will plan to move on. So to implement the vision outlined and mapped for Mobile, the city uses what's called a capital improvement plan to determine where to invest its money, how the land can support a specific development, and which city department programs should be tagged to lead the implementation. Capital improvement plans generally are used to plan community development and coordinate when, where, and how much funding is allocated to various infrastructure projects. These plans are focused on the physical structures, systems, and facilities across the city. They generally give a multiple-year prediction of the city's financial needs, and the projects that they focus on will likely be used for decades. The most recent capital improvement plan for Mobile was released in February 2023 and shares a 5-year plan for how the city will invest in infrastructure like roads and building repairs and public facilities such as parks, community center, and tourism centers. While there are citywide projects in the capital improvement plan that will broadly impact Africatown and the rest of the city of Mobile, there are 4 projects specific to Africatown. These include the Africatown Landing and Connection Blueway project, an access point from Mobile River to the Africatown Welcome Center, repairs for Kid Park, installation of HVAC units for the Robert Hope Center, and the Africatown Welcome Center. As you review this new capital improvement plan, consider, do you agree with these project priorities? What other capital improvement projects could or should the city be working on over the next 5 to 10 years? Take another minute to enter into the chat your ideas. Beyond tourism and providing improvement projects, what more would you like to see be done in Africatown to develop the community into what you desire for the next 5 years? Again, I'll ask that question again. Beyond tourism and building improvement projects, what more would you like to see be done to develop Africatown into the community you desire in the next 5 years? We'll give you another minute or so to enter your thoughts in the chat. Again, please feel free to continue engaging in the chat with the previous question. To help keep track of all these projects in Mobile, the city has created a site online that allows people to interact with a map and view information on different projects. This slide shows what that website looks like. At the top, you'll see the total number of active projects in Mobile, the total budget for all the active projects in the area, and how many projects there are for each program. If you visit this page, you can explore each project more in depth and see where each project is in terms of its cost and its timeline. When you zoom in on this map, you can then see some active projects that are in progress in Africatown specifically. Through this tool, you can keep track of the city's project timelines and investments in the community's development. On your own time, an interesting exercise would be to reflect on each of the projects currently active in Africatown and think about what progress you have seen. Have you experienced the benefits of these investments? What are your thoughts on the timeline for completion of these projects? How has the city informed the community about project delays? And what barriers may exist that slow the forward movement of these projects and others? To support the vision and goals of Map for Mobile, the city has also created what's called a future land use plan, which helps the city decide how the land in Mobile can be used to support its plan for community development. It provides guidance on the city's future decisions on zoning and land development. To understand the plan for future land use, it is important to first understand the concepts of zoning. In its most basic sense, zoning determines how land can be used or what can be built where. Zoning designates how land can be used by creating different classifications, such as residential, commercial, and industrial. Whether someone can build a home, a business, or a factory on a piece of land is determined by its zoning. Each property is assigned a particular zone, which dictates, among other things, how tall the building can be, how much of the property area the building can cover, and most importantly for this discussion, what you can do on the property. For most residential zones, the only thing you're allowed to do by right, in other words, without having to seek additional approval, is to use the property to build a home. Commercially zoned properties, on the other hand, allow you to build just about any legal commercial operation on a site. An area's zone can be changed or rezoned for different uses. Rezoning is important because it can support or hinder future development efforts. In July 2022, the City of Mobile adopted a unified development code, which proposes new zoning districts across the city. Here are some of the important elements of the new codes that the city has identified as important. The first is improving neighborhoods by protecting investments, property values, and quality of life. The second is protecting the environment by introducing new supports for protecting natural resources. The third is supporting development by making the approval processes faster, more predictable, and more consistent. The fourth is strengthening the economy by reflecting modern practices in land use planning and economic development. Do you feel that these zoning elements are important to you and to Africatown? And how and if have you seen these important elements be applied to Africatown? Have they? This image shows another tool, the City of Mobile's digital zoning map. This reflects the most recently adopted zoning ordinances, rulings, and decisions impacting the uses of different properties. With this map, you can explore the zoning of specific areas. All the existing zoning districts can be seen to the right of the screen. As part of the development of this unified development code, the city approved the Africatown overlay, and that created what's called a safety zone, seen in pink. What does it mean to have an overlay and a safety zone in a city's zoning plan? Basically, an overlay gives standards and zoning rules to only the area that is outlined. Areas within the boundaries of an overlay have a special set of rules and regulations. For Africatown, within the safety zone, any existing industrial use is considered in conflict with the use that is identified for the future. So if the industry use is abandoned, and the if is important to note here, the future uses must be limited to uses allowed within the current zoning district. So if land is currently zoned and used for industrial use, but that industry is abandoned, if the overlay says that space can be used for something like housing, the land can be rezoned to allow for that use. As we think about and look to what could be an Africatown, the future land use map is a resource that helps with that vision. The future land use map describes land uses intended for an area in the future. This slide shows the interactive version of the future land use map, which is also available on the City of Mobile's website. The map visually lays out what zoning generally should be in the future. In the future land use map, the details of each land use label are explained. For Mobile, the future land use map is a general guide, but it's not written in law or required to be followed. As stakeholders interested in Africatown, an interesting experiment could be to review the future land use map and think about which elements of this map do you agree with? Which elements would you like to see changed or included? And does this plan match your vision for Africatown? In 2015, some Africatown residents and community stakeholders came together with the city to work on a plan for the neighborhood of Africatown. This map is the outcome of that process and is in the Africatown Neighborhood Plan, which was published in 2016. This map shows what those stakeholders envisioned for land use in Africatown in the future. As you can see, it includes residential areas, commercial corridors, areas for parks and open spaces and industries. I'll pause here for a minute to let you digest the slide and reflect on a few questions. Looking at this map, how does this plan align with the needs of Africatown 8 years later? How does this map compare to the future land use currently planned for the City of Mobile? And what is needed to ensure that land in Africatown is used to benefit the current and future residents and the stakeholders of Africatown and support new growth? Finally, what barriers have you experienced in influencing or deciding land use in Africatown, and what barriers do you anticipate? Various departments in the City of Mobile also support projects and initiatives that align with the goals for the map for Mobile. For example, the Neighborhood Renewal Program managed by the Neighborhood Development Department works to address vacant and blighted properties and revitalize neighborhoods in Mobile. How do you think programs like the Neighborhood Renewal Program could benefit Africatown? Finally, please provide your input on these questions using the chat. What are some ways that you have been or see yourself being involved in the implementation of plans for Africatown? And how can you make sure that these plans build upon and enhance Africatown's strengths, assets, and neighborhood character? Feel free to take a little time to think about it and answer your thoughts in the chat. As you continue to enter your thoughts in the chat, we'll move into summarizing some of the comments that we received last week. Here are examples of responses that we got last week when we asked what the defining characteristics of Africatown are. We heard its legacy of leadership and survival against all odds, the kindness and giving of the people, its history and culture, schools and churches. And here are some examples of responses that we got last week from you all when we asked attendees to describe the look and feel that they want for Africatown by 2040. Africatown should look and feel similar to other well cared for neighborhoods, not just residential, but a business corridor or areas that provide jobs and recreation. The look should focus on the future, shaped by the resilient past that took strength and unity to remain and go forward. And finally, neighbors feel connected to each other, shared history, family, and connections. These are results from last week's poll of participants. The majority of people who attended last week live in another area of Mobile, not Africatown, or in another area of the United States, outside of Alabama. And the majority of participants were above the age of 46, with most people above age 60. To help us understand how the attendance has shifted or grown and to see who is participating tonight, we're going to run a poll, the same poll, with a few short questions about you. We'll launch the poll now. You may need to scroll down to answer all 3 questions. We'll leave it open for about a minute, and then we'll close the poll at the end and show the results so you can see. We now have over 80% of participation, so I think we will close out the poll and share the results. Last week, we received evaluation responses from 5 people. When asked to rank how well they think this presentation improved their ability to build the community that they desired, on a scale of 1 to 5, 2 people said 4 and 2 people said 5. The link to this week's evaluation will now be entered and dropped into the chat. If you could please take a few minutes to complete that, it will really help us make sure that we're paying attention to what you've said during the presentations, during the next several weeks of presentations. And as a reminder, we'll also be creating a frequently asked questions sheet from these workshops as well.
We understand that some of the tools shared this evening may not be easy to navigate. So as the Africatown Heritage Preservation Foundation, we want to share that we are a resource, an available resource to the community to help anyone understanding and utilizing these city resources. Again, what another great evening of a presentation. What information that we received over the last several weeks is impactful and will help the community build towards the Africatown that the community desires. To learn more about the Africatown Heritage Preservation Foundation, I welcome you to please contact us using this link below. It is also my pleasure to invite all of you to partake and become partners of the Africatown Heritage Preservation Foundation. We are here to support the Africatown community. We want to be a lasting resource to help the residents of Africatown build, develop, and execute the Africatown that they desire. For those unable to attend tonight's presentation or the previous workshops, or would like to review what has been said, the foundation will be posting these recordings to our website each week. If you attended this workshop, we would like to ask that you continue to participate and invite people who you know or who you think would benefit from this impactful information to next week's workshop and for the remainder of the series. Please invite them by using this RSVP link by emailing info@meetviavideo.com, info@meetviavideo.com, or calling 251-216-1661. Again, my name is Levy King. I humbly serve as the board chairman for the Africatown Heritage Preservation Foundation. And on behalf of our board of directors and our entire organization, we thank you for being here with us on this evening. Please share this wonderful story of our presentations, and we look forward to seeing you and your guests next week. Have a good evening to all.